Hi guys, welcome to this video, and this video is going to be using this bad boy here. This is the Piper Comanche, the latest release from A2A Simulations. It's going to be slightly different. It's not going to be a review per se, but I'll discuss that as we go. The scenery, by the way, for those who want to know where we are, is Southampton, courtesy of Orbex, and it's very nice scenery as well. I might do something about it in the future, but if you look at the difference with the block paving on the apron and the tarmac and the lighting, glorious stuff. Right. Back to the case in point. This is the Piper Comanche, which is a really nicely, highly detailed aircraft produced by A2A Simulations. Now the key here is that it's what's called an Accu-Sim aircraft. Now, basically, to sort of summarise it, what it's supposed to do is take a highly detailed simulation of an aircraft, because there are lots of highly detailed simulations of an aircraft, but it's their specific take on developing that further into almost a living, breathing entity. So this video is, as I say, it's not a tutorial. The aim of this video is that I, having not read the manual and having not read the literature about it, I'm going to go and see what Accu-Sim adds, or what I think Accu-Sim adds, by having a look around and then flying the plane, and we'll see what happens with that. Now, why have I not read the manual or the blurb that comes from the advertising side of things? Well, if you normally have a tutorial, not a tutorial, if you normally have a review, what happens in effect is you compare what the manufacturer's features are alongside the real aircraft, alongside the modelled aircraft, and you take this sort of furball of information, and you generate, as a result of that, some sort of opinion and some sort of factual information as a result of that review. That's not the aim of this, because there are plenty of highly detailed aircraft out there for FSX, P3D and X-Plane. The purpose of this is that without, if you like, pre-colouring any impressions or any ideas, we're going to take this aircraft out and we're going to have a mess around and see what happens. Now, I've got about 5 or 6 hours on the aircraft in terms of handling. However, what I haven't done is, as I say, I haven't gone through the manufacturer's stuff. The reason being is that, in effect, what happens is when people design aircraft, all manufacturers and all designers and all developers do this. They decide that they're going to include certain features, and they create a list of those features. Now, that's great if you want to do a tick box exercise of saying they say they've created this and they've included this feature, check, yes, it's there. They say this feature's there, check, yes, it's there. What I want to do is I want to see what this aircraft gives me, not what I can check off on a list, but what it gives me, which is going to be rather difficult to do. So this is a bit of an experiment on my part, and we'll see how it goes. So this is obviously a very highly detailed aircraft. The first thing, let's have a look at this. This is A2A allow you to do walkarounds. Now, I use EasyDock, and it's the two are not friendly bedfellows at all. So, fuel quantity, check for desired level. We're not even looking at the plane, but yes, desired level. So we've got that. And the walkaround, one of the key elements is here is the walkaround gives you a certain amount of ownership of the aircraft. In fact, I think it's underneath the wing there. Play fair. Come on. Left wing check visually. There we go. This is the one I wanted. You can see how little I've actually messed around with this. Let's at least have a look at his pretty face. So this is where Accu-Sim comes in. Accu-Sim, I'm sure some people have heard of the idea of persistent modelling. The idea that whatever condition you leave the aircraft in is the condition that it is in when you get back to it. Likewise, the way you use the aircraft then reflects the behaviour of the aircraft. So if you are particularly poor in the way you handle or use the aircraft, it has ramifications in terms of persistent modelling. So if you leave the battery on, when you next come back to the sim, the battery will be dead and you won't be able to start without going into the workshop. So this is the kind of thing where, for me, and I've not really experienced much of it yet, but change the oil every 25 hours or 4 months, whichever comes first. Can be extended to 40. Don't let it sit for a long period of time with dirty black oil, since acids form and internally corrode the engine. And it is simulated. So when we click on here, we can see we've got relatively decent oil here. Oil capacity 12 quarts. We're just below 12 quarts. So we're fine. But fundamentally, this is the kind of thing where if you leave this aircraft, and I haven't flown this for a couple of weeks, but if you leave the aircraft, I know that, for example, the batteries run down. It's real time. So if you don't fly this thing for the best part of 3 months, it ain't going to start. So you have one of two choices. You either continually go into the hangar to fix the thing, or the other alternative is that you actually fly it and you look after it and you maintain it. Now that's where it comes with a sense of ownership. I do have other A2A aircraft, and I have been frustrated when I haven't flown it for 6 or 8 weeks and all of a sudden I come back and there's no battery and I have to do all that kind of stuff. So the walk around is actually valid, because you can see here you do actually get an indication of oil. When you check the fuel, you can see the fuel level. Where's the filter gone? Here we go. So here you got fuel strainer, quick drain valve, drain and inspect fuel. If you look down here, there's a little button that says drain more. One of the things that can happen with fuel tanks in light aircraft in particular is that when they're left sat there, condensation can form on the inside of the fuel tanks, and that obviously leaves water in the fuel tanks. Now water is heavier than aviation gas, avgas, so it will sit in the bottom half of the container. If you've got a nice container of consistent colour of blue fluid, you know that that's all fuel. If you have a line where you have the immiscible liquids, I like that word, immiscible liquids of water and fuel, the water is heavier and sits down at the bottom, and you'll see it's a clear colourless solution with the fuel, coloured fuel above it, and you'll see like a wavy line where the two aren't mixing. So I haven't seen it in this, but I can only infer that the fact they have a drain more button means that you can keep draining it until there's no water left or no sediment left, which is a really nice feature. I've yet to see it, but I'm sure at some point when I don't fly this aircraft for a while I will. In terms of general aviation, one of the things they do to prevent that is they try and keep the tanks quite full, because then there's no airspace for it to develop the condensation. Interesting thing I spotted the other way, by the way, Land Rover sign on the back of the vehicle. So Orbex have been paying attention to the kind of users who use their facilities at Southampton. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much into the detailing of the modelling, because fundamentally a lot of that can be achieved through sheer hard work and persistence. But the element here is that how much of the character of the aircraft has been transferred into the actual simulation. So let's pop inside and see how we get on. Okay, with the usual A2A aplomb, absolutely gorgeously detailed interior, and there are some really lovely modelling touches. Now these are detailing modelling touches. For me they wouldn't warrant the badge of Accu-Sim, and I'll explain why. There's lovely sounds in terms of, you know, the levers make all the right sounds. If you hit them to the stops, you know, you can hear there's different noises for the flap depending on which way you're using it. And then when you get to the end, listen for the thunk. Now that is excellent detailing, does add a level of immersion that maybe other aircraft haven't got. And there are some lovely features, like if you click you can put up the bungee for the controls, stop them flapping around in the wind, although Southampton's not particularly bad today. One previous video I did, somebody highlighted the fact I hadn't mentioned the glove box. So it's got a glove box. Now this is what I'm on about. This is really nice modelling, but it doesn't really add a great deal to me for the immersion, because I don't fire this aircraft up and go, you know what, I've not opened that glove box for ages, let's go on to an aircraft and open a glove box. That's not, for me, where Accu-Sim where Accu-Sim comes in. That's just really good modelling. And I think, you know, obviously it's hard to dispute that that level of in-depth modelling is great. Accu-Sim, I do know from the other aircraft I've flown that Accu-Sim does a lot in terms of the engine behaviour. As an example, I tried to use FS Recorder the other day, and A2A's aircraft struggle with FS Recorder because everything is programmed outside of the normal modelling. So what that means is you get the flight path information, but you don't get controls positions, you don't get engine instrument indications, you don't get the prop doesn't even turn. So in effect, what we can say is that all this is definitely programmed outside of the normal sim. Why would they want to do that? Well, I guess the fact is that when they say living, breathing aircraft, and having used their products before, one of the elements is that they actually have modelling for the engine. So what you see here, particularly in terms of the engine, is something that in effect is not just a direct sort of lift of information. So in terms of the throttle, if you set the mixture and throttle at whatever it is in the air, a lot of sims will just basically go, well, you've got the mixture, the throttle, the weight, we'll put it all into a nice big sort of computation and we'll come out with what the figures here should be. Accu-Sim, to the best of my knowledge, goes one further, and the engine behaviour depends on a number of things. It depends on, as we've seen, your maintenance. It depends on your flight, how you handle the aircraft, and all sorts of other things. So there's a lot to it. I'm not going to go through the list of Accu-Sim features, as I say, because I haven't read the manual. Those details are available if you just want to look at the web page or online. Lovely features. I love some of the features, like when this drop down clatters at the bottom. We just need to clear some of the condensation, the misting up in the canopy. And again, this is one of the things. This is for me an Accu-Sim feature. If you don't bother to use the facilities that are there, you are going to end up with a misted up cockpit, and it's not going to be the nicest experience trying to take off with this. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to get started and get going. As I say, there's a lot of nice detailing touches, different sounds and whatnot, but that's not really Accu-Sim. That's just nice modelling. What we're looking for specifically is the Accu-Sim. I do like this, by the way. Those of you who have sat in the back of a car designed and developed in the 70s or 80s, or possibly even earlier, but I remember it from the 70s, stroke early 80s, from a Ford Cortina, will remember the little smoking ashtrays in the back of the car, and they made this horrible grating metal sound just like that. They've absolutely nailed that. It's almost like somebody's just gone, you know what, that'd be a great thing to simulate, and we'll have the noise. And if you like, the immersion and inclusion includes a lot of things like that. There are some really nice touches. Now, I would class this as either excessive in terms of behaviour or attention to detail. It could possibly even be Accu-Sim. So you can see that this is the lock. Most Piper aircraft have this lock because the way the door works is it's hinged down here, that sort of area, but you can see that the top opens out and it's clear of the airframe here. So I've now locked that. Let's see what happens when we close the door. And there's a gap, because this now is stopping the door from closing fully. So let's remove the lock. You can see the door comes in a little bit. We've still got the gap, and let's actually do the lock properly now. And the door's closed. So that for me is an Accu-Sim element. It's easy to go, oh, door's closed and locked. Well, this one actually has to be locked, otherwise you get a gap, and I'm quite sure that the noise effect will change as a result of that. As an Accu-Sim element, by the way, I've at least once forgotten to cycle the prop on some of the Accu-Sim aircraft, and you will end up with particles of metal in the bottom of your sump, because the aircraft really doesn't like it. I am going to abuse the aircraft. I'm not going to be nice to it. The aim is to see really what Accu-Sim gives me as feedback, as information, what it tells me about the aircraft, not what I can infer from my experience. So of course there is a caveat that I have flown A2A stuff before, but I want to see what this aircraft gives me. So without further ado, let's try and get it airborne. We'll go to the checklist, move them up a bit out of the way. So all this is fine. Takeoff full throttle, climb 24 squared, trim 90 to 120, cruise is up to 24, 18 to 24, 125, 180. We're probably not going to mess around with that too much. Prime 1 to 5. I mean, you'd back off the prop for the climb and the cruise out of sympathy to the mechanical systems. I don't really want to demonstrate too much sympathy, because I want the plane to get upset with me. I want to see how it talks to me. Prime 1 to 5 on the ground before starting. Lean on the ground, we're going to ignore that. What we will do, actually, whilst I think about it, let's pop into the hangar. Oh, lovely. Some plugs are foul. Try leaning out during ground ops. So we'll do that. We will, in fact, we'll not do that. We'll see what happens with these bad plugs, with these rough running plugs. Idle under 1,000 with cold engine. Stall 64. Flaps 125. Gear 150. Approach speed. Flaps up 105 and a max cross of 15. Don't know what the wind is, but they're taking off on the, let me see, what are we looking, the northerly runway 02, so we'll copy that. Now here is an Accu-Sim element, and I will explain this. It's not present at the moment. This looks like an HSI, but it's not like a modern HSI. The reason being, in fact I'll just move my position. The reason being, this is your normal magnetic compass that you have in virtually every aircraft. Even large airliners have a straightforward magnetic compass, the most basic instrument you can have. And you can see that's on about 202. Unlike an HSI, you can set the heading on this. It's more like a traditional DI. So if you get in the aircraft and this is misset, you won't know. You take off and you fly and off you go into your little world. So we'll just leave that for the moment and just watch what happens when I start the aircraft. Okay, so let's put the power on. In fact, let's turn it off. Let's go through this lot. Page 1, page 2, pre-flight complete, passengers briefed, seatbelts, shoulder harness on, flaps are up, radio's off, circuit breakers in, switches in, autopilot off, beacon on, which is an odd way to do it before the master switch, because obviously it doesn't show anything now. Carb heat off, and fuel selector's desired tank, which is both in gear switch, can go down. Throttle cracked, mixture fully rich, prop full, which it is, master switch is going on. Check the gear light screen, which it is, fuel pump can go on, and check pressure. Right, let's have a look at this. This is a an element of it. Fuel pressure rises slowly. It doesn't come off the blocks to start with, and it stops short of where you would hope for it to be once everything's running. But fundamentally, that's the kind of thing where rather than the needle going ping, it does it as you would expect it to do in the real aircraft. So the pump off, engine prime, we'll go for 3. There we go, let's lock that off. If you don't lock it off in real life, you do get problems because they can work loose and cause the engine to run excessively rich. So props clear, in fact, sorry, mags to both. Prop is clear and starter engage. Oh, there we go. Thought about it. Thought about it. Right, let's bring the RPM back. We're running a little rough. You can see the canopy, the cowling started bouncing a little bit there, and the RPM needle's bouncing. This is going to be linked to our fouled plugs, without any shadow of doubt. Ammeter and oil pressure are fine. If you look down here with the ammeter, by the way, when it's to the right, it means it's charging the battery. So your alternator or your generator, depending on the aircraft, is fine and charging the battery. If it's to the left, your alternator or generator is not working fine, and it means that the powering, the device powering the aircraft at that point is the battery. So this is battery drain, this is battery charge, and obviously at some point it will get into the middle where the battery doesn't need draining or charging. You can see Accu-Sim now, fuel pressure. I say Accu-Sim or detailing, I'm not really quite sure which one of the two it is, but certainly now, as I said, the maximum, the fuel pressure is right up there. Let's just, fuel pump is off, so we're alright with that. Oil pressure's in the green, oil temperature is right at the bottom of the green, but we expect that to rise. Cylinder head temperature's at the bottom as well. So, let's go on to the next bit. I'm not going to lean the mixture, I want to see dirty plugs. Radio's going on. All the nav gear can go on. Ooh, yeah, now this is something I really like. Is it Accu-Sim or not? I don't know. I would suggest it is. It brings an element of immersion. I think the key here is immersion. Do I feel like I'm part of this aircraft? Turn it on and there's a delay before the figures come up. Most things you go tink, display comes up immediately. Lovely. It adds the feeling for me that this is a real life aircraft. Let's close that. Get rid of some of the noise. So all of this is fine. Heading indicator. You see, heading indicator. We get back to this now. We need to set it. So it's 202, as we say. It's a bit awkward because you have to press it in with the left-hand mouse button and then turn it using the wheel. I think you can probably do it through some keystroke somewhere, but that's the bit where actually, you know, it doesn't seem like much of a check. You have to do it, otherwise what happens is your autopilot heading It's just a bug. It doesn't actually care what heading it is, it just drives to that. Likewise, your course is all in relation to this. Well, if this heading is out, you're going to really struggle, and I've had that before where I missed that once and it was just awful. So everything is fine, radio not bothering with ATIS, parking brake release. Trick with the parking brake, guys, real life, before you start taking the parking brake and herring off into the real world, take the power down and then take the brakes off and then reintroduce the power. That way you're not going to excessively strain the brakes, says he, and the brakes don't want to go. There we go, let's do it that way. I'm not going to wait for the engine to warm up, not overly excited about that. Clunk, clunk, clunk goes the suspension. So it's nice noise. That's, for me, that's just nice detailing. There's quite a few aircraft out there. I think actually how it behaves is going to let's just play with the apron a bit. See what we get here. Get a high rate of turn. Oh, actually get a bit of roll there. That's nice. Getting a bit dizzy now, so let's leave that. We'll not bother using the full length of the runway. We don't need to with Southampton. We've got plenty of room here. So brakes, yeah, they're working fine. We know they're working fine. We've just done a nice pirouette on the apron. The suspension does make all sorts of squeaking noises. It tells you if it's happy or not, as do the brakes. So idle before your brakes will stop and then reintroduce your power. You don't want to be fighting with your brakes against your engine when you're putting them on. That's really not a good idea. Okay, so let's go through this then. Brakes hold, fuel quantity is fine, selectors are on both, mixture is set, throttle going to 2000 RPM. Now this should show if we've got some foul plugs. You know, it's given us a little line saying we've got foul plugs. Have we actually got foul plugs? So in effect what's happening now is you've got, as I understand it with Accu-Sim, you've got this, in effect, a second modelling set. So you've got aerodynamics are usually modelled, we're familiar with the idea of that, but in effect what we've got is engine modelling, prop modelling, and the whole caboodle is based on how you handle and motor around in the aircraft. So you can see we've got a little bit of a judder, it's coming through as a bounce on the cowling, it's not the smoothest running thing on earth, so let's have a look at this as to why. T's and P's, well, the oil temperature's just in the green, the cylinder head's coming up slowly, so we'll see how we get on, we'll just ignore that. Okay, magnetos, check. Now I've seen people go once to the left, two to the left, and then return. What you're trying to do is complete each circuit check, so once to the left, expecting a drop of up to 175. That's 125, sorry, maximum, that's fine, and restores. So that circuit is checked. Then we drop into that one. Little bit of bouncing, it's not too bad actually, the plugs don't seem to be too badly fouled. So that's all right. Prop cycle, 1 to 3 times. I took this off, first time I ever flew it, as I say, I hadn't read the manual, so I just took it off. I'd completely missed the fact that this isn't a blue prop lever. I hadn't bothered with the checks, and the next thing I know is the engine starts coughing, spewing, then it stops developing power, and then I have to roll to a halt in basically an abandoned takeoff roll. Turns out when I then went into the hangar I had lots of bits of metal in the bottom of the sump. It had registered that I hadn't done the prop cycling properly, and it decided to reward me with a knackered engine. Carb heat's fine, you expect a drop because as soon as you apply carb heat you've got warm, less dense air going into the engine and it won't develop as much power because the fuel-air mixture changes. So let's bring it back to idle. Controls full free and collects, fuel selectors are desired tanks, fuel pump is going on, carb heat's off, mixture fully rich, prop is set, engine gauge is checked, trim tab is neutral, flaps are set, we're not going to bother, we've got a nice long runway, and door is latched. So let's just pop that there and let's go for it. Let's have a look around. There's one on finals, but we'll be out of the way quick first. 2 on finals. I've got Ultimate Traffic 2 running, by the way, folks, so just in case you're wondering why I've got aircraft trundling around. Not only that, have a look at this scenery. This is Orbex's Southampton. I didn't mean to open that. We'll close that though. Orbex's Southampton, which is just fantastic. the level of detail on things like the tarmac and the buildings is stupendous. Okay, we'll do a rolling takeoff. Thump thump bang bang. It's really not. It's not. You can hear the engine note isn't constant. It's not. It's smoothing out now. Bit of a late rotation. We're supposed to rotate at 85, climb out at 105, so we're going a bit fast. Word of warning for those who use a gear switch. This is a 3-position switch, so because it's down, as soon as I choose up, it actually goes to off, and I have to press it again to get the gear to go up. That sounds like it's finished, so let's go to off. We do have real life weather going. Well, not real life, it's Orbex's weather, so we do have some quite sporty weather conditions to play with. We haven't got flaps, so we're just going to climb out to 120. We're going to enjoy the scenery for a bit. Whee, so there's the weather. Right. Features of the aircraft, I suppose, or let's look at it another way. What are Orbex giving us? What are A2A giving us? So let's bring the throttle back. It wanted 24 squared for the climb. So let's bring that back to 24. Remember, always power back and rev up. We will treat it fairly nicely. Now, the prop is playing silly buggers here. You can see it's not really trying to hold a stable thing. The aircraft's playing silly buggers as well. But you can see the prop there was a bit not really interested. So let's just put our throttle back to 24 inches. Got a bit of yaw on. So the aircraft's talking to me. In fact, it's talking to me saying this weather's flipping horrible. Right. Let's go. Fuel pump off. Fuel pressure checked is fine. Max 24, speed, best angle, best rate, best on route is 120, which is what we've got just about. Cylinder head's fine. Mixture, lean over 5,000. We're going to ignore that. Cruise, power set, RPM, mixture. Fuel pump is off. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so aircraft talking to me. It can do so in a number of ways. It can do so in terms of handling. So when I get to this position, I'm quite nose high, the speed's bleeding. What we'll do is we'll do a bit of slow speed handling. The wind's rather choppy actually today. So my roll is very woolly indeed. It's telling me I'm slow as a result of my control response, the responsiveness to my controls. Now, pitch and rudder shouldn't be too bad because I've got power applied. So pitch, nice and crisp. Rudder, a bit more wallowy, but we are at slow speed. As soon as we accelerate, all these things will... Don't forget, it's a stable GA aircraft. It's designed to be stable. So, yeah, as far as I see it, as we get the speed up, look, the crispness of the controls increases. So completely different. So actually the control response is telling me what sort of airspeed I'm flying at, so I can get feedback in terms of the controls. So that's the first thing. It is talking to me in terms of the variables for the control rate response compared to the power setting and the turns. Let's take the power right off. That's the gear up warning horn. I'm really not interested in that. I'm going to slow right down. I'm going to do a quick stall. I'm going to do a clean stall, and I'm going to talk through it. One of my bugbears is actually, you'll see it. The aircraft's going to talk to me if I do this. You'll see people do their stalls, and they go, "Oh, I'm going to demonstrate a stall." There's two sorts of stalls. There's what's called an accelerated stall and a 1G stall, really. The 1G one, I read a book by John Farley, a very well-known, highly respected test pilot, who basically says the 1G stall is where you allow the airspeed to decrease at 1 knot per second with no climb or descent, and that's where you get your stall, your basic stall speed in the clean configuration from. And you'll see a lot of YouTubers. I'll demonstrate the second way of doing it, which is technically you're unlikely to see it in terms of when you're in general aviation, but you can see the speed's coming back quite slowly. We've got a little bit of a wag on in terms of yaw, predominantly due to the weather, trying to maintain. Now, thump, thump, bang, bang. The aircraft's telling me visually and audio is going to stall. The warning's on. It's not doing anything scary, which is pretty correct actually. Most GA aircraft in a power off stall aren't interested in doing anything other than nodding, wagging and doing a bit of this. So what we will do is we'll let it get a bit nose high again. You shouldn't really use aileron because that risks going into a spin because of the adverse drag, the adverse yaw as a result of the drag. But now we're up, let's put a bit of rudder in and see what it's like. Once, whoa, look at that speed, twice, 3 times, recover, full opposite aileron, full opposite rudder, balanced ailerons, and forward stick enough to break the stall on the wings. So that's really nice, stalls really well, but it spoke to me, it told me I'm flying, because this is now high speed again, so I've got lovely crisp handling. Look, the controls, and now if I put power on, did you hear the engine note change there with the prop? The yaw response is lovely and crisp, look, absolutely gorgeous. I don't know if you heard that with the power. Watch the power, watch this now. This is where the engine's going. I'm really not happy with what you're doing. Remember that we set ourselves at 2400 RPM. Let's start to make some demands to the constant speed unit. If you haven't watched my video on the constant speed unit, you will see some of the effects here. So when I put power on, it overshoots the governor. The governor has a delay, it has a lag to it. So take the power off, your RPM drops obviously because you're below the governor speed. Put it on quickly, you can hear the engine, it doesn't like it, and then the governor settles down. If I go further over here just to this way, this is an interesting little gauge. This is basically an efficiency meter, but watch what happens. There's different speeds depending on the gauge. So if I apply power, this one, which is basically a fuel flow gauge, spins up very quickly. The RPM and the manifold pressure lag behind. Pull it back. These two pretty quick to operate, and that one is almost directly behind it, but there's a slight delay. So when you put the power on, this one responds first. You see it overshot again, and again these two came first and then that one. So it really is talking to me. Likewise, I've flown, I've not had my hand on the stick at all. As you can see, I'm playing with the throttle with the left hand, who misses FNAR, and the right hand's controlling the mouse at the minute. So where's Southampton got to? Okay, we've got plenty of height. We're going to do a dirty stall. Now, in fact, let's do an accelerated stall. Accelerated stall. Let's get the airspeed off a bit. Now, the stall came in at 83 knots. So when you see people going, I'm going to demonstrate a stall in this aircraft in FSX. Back into the green arc. Look at the green arc. Green arc for a green arc stall is 70 knots, but look at where the light comes on. Because I'm pulling G, light came on at 100 knots there. So when you see people going, I'm going to do a stall, and they end up in this predicament before they pull, it's not going to spin, so that's not stalling an aircraft. Now we're going to do a dirty stall. Mrs. FNAR. So allow it to travel. Set it back to the midpoint. We'll set about probably 1500 RPM. I will do the same thing, look. We're not going to try and climb, we're not going to deliberately shove the nose into the sky. We'll just do a 1G stall and see what happens. Now this is probably going to have a wing drop. Put a little bit more power on to provoke a wing drop. Let's try and get the stall warning. There it goes, left wing's gone. So stop the incipient spin, we'll do that again. Put a little bit more power on so that we get some good airflow over the flaps. And basically put another stage of flap down as well. Basically what's happening is the flaps are causing us problems in terms of wing drop because the air corkscrewing around the fuselage. So this stall speed is going to be quite low. Just use the nose to drop the speed off. Now we're there, let's just pull back and maintain approximately 0. Make sure we're balanced. Stall's going to happen any minute now. Needle's below 64, look. Starting to bump. Starting to think about it, we've got too much power on. So let's just bring the power back a little bit. There's the warning, there's the bump, 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 bump. and eventually it wants to consider dropping a wing. Right. So the aircraft's talking to me, it's telling me, it's bumping, it's making noises. So we can hear the wind noises better. Let's get the airspeed off, see what happens with the wind noise at low airspeed. You can see, or hear, I should say. So let's see what we get at high airspeed. As I say, I'm not treating this thing gently, I'm really not interested in doing that. You can hear the wind noise is increasing. Right. So we're getting audio indications. The airplane, if you notice, is wallowing around. So this, where is Southampton? God, that's quite a way behind us, isn't it? So let's do a 180. Now, I'm reliant on the aircraft to tell me whether it wants to do this. Go all out. Chase Southampton, it's over there somewhere. One of the things we hadn't looked at is leaning. This apparently you can lean by ear. Oh, do you hear the engine note change there? Now you can also see the RPM started to bounce, which is telling us we're running a little bit too lean. Push it. We're still running too lean. Push it in a bit. All settles down. Did you hear it going whoop whoop? Bang bang whoop whoop. So you can actually lean by ear. Right. Where's this flipping airfield gone? It's behind us now. So let's give it a little bit of abuse. We're quite fast, so let's let me see what it says. Cross controls. Over we go. 100 knots. Oh, there it is. So it's telling me a lot. What I'm going to do, in fact I'll do it down this side. We're way above our gear limiting speed. Let's see what it does. Gear down. Really loud rumble from the wind noise. We're going to fly it by feel and sound. So I'm allowed to look left and right, but not up and down. So I've got no instruments, all I've got now is the control response that's coming back to me through the controls, the trim response, the engine noise, the wind noise, and what I can see with my eyes. So that's all I'm going to do. It's a bit of a novel one. Now the landing speed for this, it was an approach speed of 105. Let me see what it says for landing. Base 110, gear down, final 90, flaps down. So I know I've got my gear down, but I'm not looking down again. We're not going to fly a pristine circuit, we're getting quite low now. Having to trim a lot though because of the airspeed. Looking out the window to use my rudder. Do a bit of a partial power landing, I think. First stage of flaps will take that. We're very close in, but we are quite low. Need to make sure the speed's okay. Now the controls are starting to get very sluggish. not a lot of wind noise. I know I'm slow, the aircraft's starting to respond less to the rudder, so I can add a bit of power to get my rudder response back, get the slipstream over the airframe. What I'm going to do actually, just before we touch down, I'm actually going to big trim change with the flaps with overshot. That was a really bad approach. However, we're recovering. We're recovering. So this is no instruments, remember. I've got no idea what the airspeed is. I'm just flying it by what the aircraft feedback is. The aircraft's telling me I'm quite slow. Everything's quite woolly, everything's quite wishy-washy. The noise is telling me what the wind is doing, which is doing okay at the minute. I've got a bit of turbulence on final here. Trimmed quite a long way nose up. Now, you'll find with a lot of aircraft, nose up trim is required at slow speeds, particularly on landing with GA aircraft with full flaps. So I know the gear's down, I know we've got full flap, that's too slow. Let's just put a bit of power back on. It's telling me it's too slow. It is a bumpy day today, isn't it? Hey? Look at that, just coming below 80 knots. Perfectly safe, but a little bit slow. Come on, get down. That'll do me. Let's abuse it. Get the flaps up, weight on wheels, swing it off the airfield, ramp the power up, do a turbo taxi, and let's get out of here. So what do I think? What do I think Accu-Sim adds? It adds character, it adds feel, the maintenance element adds a sense of pride and ownership. It's utterly deflating when you then end up going to start the aircraft and it won't start because you haven't looked after it. You feel guilty when you throw it around the sky like I've done. The speed affects the behaviour. You can see that the engine is affected by what you do. We'll just turn it off quickly, we're not going to bother doing the checklist. This is a rough and ready thing. Just pop that back a little bit. But everything is affected by what you do, and we saw the engine performance. It's not just simply a set of needles attached to your controls. Cylinder head temperature is right back down again, the fuel pressure is right back up, the oil pressure is still in the green. All these gauges are responding. You could see the different way that the gauges was responding. It's changing depending on oil temperature, how much you've used it. All of this stuff is being worked out. But the whole package, is it immersive? Yes, it is immersive. Does it give you a sense of ownership? Yes, it does give you a sense of ownership. Do you feel guilty if you mishandle the aircraft? Yes, you do feel guilty if you mishandle the aircraft. Does it make you want to consider how you behave with the aircraft? Yes, it does. Lovely little detailing tricks. So it's hard to put your finger on specifically what Accu-Sim produces and what it doesn't, what's good modelling, what isn't. The whole package, though, goes together to provide a living, breathing aircraft that talks to you. You know, we've just flown a final approach, which came in 80 knots. Their landing speed was, what was it? Approach landing, final 90. So we're 10 knots too slow. But throughout that, I was saying, oh, we're a little bit slow here. We're a little bit slow. It's very woolly. The aircraft was telling me the speed. Now, I'm never going to get 90 mile an hour bang on just by flying this thing without the instruments, but what it's shown is that there's enough feedback in the aircraft in terms of the controls, the control position, the trim position, the wind noise, etc., that you can actually fly it without you know, perfect instruments. You can fly it in a very raw and visceral sense, as you would do with, you know, old tail draggers like the Piper Cub and things like that. Really, really impressive. I like it a lot. Simple little things like the way the door interacts with the fact that you're off the ground and in the wind. just the whole package, the Accu-Sim element takes it beyond. Now, have I gone through the checklist if it does X, Y, Z? No, I haven't gone through the checklist. What I've done is I've taken the aircraft up and I've gone, what does the aircraft tell me? Does it tell me if it's slow? Does it tell me if it's happy? Does it tell me if it's unhappy? And so on and so forth. Hopefully you guys found that interesting. Would I recommend aircraft with Accu-Sim? Definitely. I think the flying experience is a little bit more, not in depth. In depth is the wrong word. There's some really deep simulations out there, but it's a little bit more involving as a person. When you then add on persistent modelling, so the engine ages, or the engine oil ages, and all sorts of degrades. You add on the fact that you can do pre-flight walkarounds, not as a gimmick, but you actually do need to check some things. You can go into the hangar before flight. You can see, like we did, we had some fouled spark plugs. Now, they didn't cause us too many problems. We'll just see what problems we've got now. Spark plugs are still a little fouled. Trust me, if you see them when they're properly fouled, this thing bounces all over the place when you do your run up to 2000 RPM. It bounces like crazy, it coughs, it splutters. We've shown that you can lean by ear, and it responds to it, and you get both a movement of the aircraft, stalling, spinning. Again, you get movement of the aircraft, you get your lights. We discussed the idea of the speed, the wind speed, everything. It's such an engaging and involving thing to do, flying aircraft with Accu-Sim, that you get, as I say, you get the ownership element, you get the pride element, and you also get, what's more important, is a living, breathing aircraft in the air. And with that final thought, guys, I shall leave you. If you enjoy the video, please don't forget to tick like, share or subscribe, and I shall see you soon. Take care.